Hi, Kerry here from My Cloud Bookkeeping. I work with small businesses and entrepreneurs to help them to manage their business finances in QuickBooks Online. Now, you may or may not be using QuickBooks Online, and this video is for anybody who is given an income statement or a profit and loss statement and perhaps is wondering, what am I looking at? Do I know if there are mistakes, and where do I start? If something didn't look right, what do you know? Do you know what questions to ask? So often, business owners are presented with reports, and it's very difficult to know exactly what you're looking at. Today, we're going to look over our income statement together, and I'll help you understand what you're looking at and how to identify if something doesn't look right. Also, let's clear something else up. Quite a few years back, the accounting community started calling the profit and loss statement the income statement. The accounting software generally, and QuickBooks Online in particular, still call this report the profit and loss statement. I'm not going to get into a discussion about which is correct or why. Just know that if you're presented with either, they're the same thing, and I hope that helps. Be sure to stay right to the end, and we'll talk a little bit about requesting the information you need if you're not being provided with it. But first, let's just take a look at how we can find those mistakes.
Here we are looking at a profit and loss statement in QuickBooks Online. It really doesn't matter that it's in QuickBooks. It could be in whatever software you're using, or perhaps it's even something you've created in Excel. But I'm in QuickBooks, and we're going to have a look and use the functionality of QuickBooks to explore what's in our profit and loss statement. Now, when we look at this in total, I don't know about you, but it doesn't really say a lot to me. It's a whole pile of numbers. There's nothing to relate it to. So pretty much the first thing I always do when I'm working with a client and we're looking at this profit and loss statement is I display it by month. So I'm going to pop up here. We have the option. Actually, it's in display. We're going to display these columns by month. So I'm going to choose transaction date months. Now, one of the challenges of working with the sample company is that it's not fully populated like a real company. So normally I'd be looking at it, what's happened since the beginning of the year. But as you can see, this company really only has data from July. So I'm just going to change that so that we're looking at actual useful information. There we go. And now we can see what's happened in July, August, September, October, and for a week or so here in November. I find that looking at it month by month kind of paints a picture of the business. And most business owners, they look at this and they can feel the story. They'll be looking mostly at the income and they'll be like, oh my goodness, yes, July, terrible month. Or maybe it was a good month, but you didn't get the invoicing done. August picked up a little bit, September, but man, October was a great month. And they will know when they're looking at this, there's that sense of understanding what those numbers mean. So when you are looking at things, look at why is it different? What's going on? Understand what's led to those different things. And if you're not sure, investigate and ask the questions. Now, I could see straight away here that the income is tended to be our operating income, but we've got these little amounts hanging out here for interest earned. This should not be showing up in our top section of our operating income. So I'm going to make a note that that needs to be fixed. And if we scroll down to the bottom here, there's sections for other expenses, other income. We're going to move that down there because what we want to be able to see is exactly what income did we have month by month from operating our business. And while these amounts aren't small, while these amounts are small, they're really not adding to the picture. And, potentially if you have large investments, you've got cash flows sitting somewhere else, you might be earning large amounts of interest that really, as I mentioned, don't have anything to do with the sales or operation of the business. So we want to move those. So if we collapse our income here, the next section we see is cost of goods sold. Now, the idea is with your cost of goods sold is you can see what it has cost you to deliver the services to your customers. And we have almost nothing here. This is an error I see over and over again, and it's really important that we allocate the expenses that relate to the income into our cost of goods sold section. If we scroll down here a little bit further, we can see job expenses and job materials. Now, it's most likely that these job materials and job expenses belong up here in our cost of goods sold. So we are not getting a proper look at what our gross profit is. So I'm going to move those in a moment and we'll relook and have a look at what that gross profit is. So that's another thing to fix. We need to fix our interest income and we need to fix our cost of goods sold. So now we're going to scroll down to our operating expenses. Operating expenses typically are going to be about the same every month. Now we're going to have to move our job materials out, but when we're looking here across at the total for operating expenses, we want to see if anything's fluctuating in a kind of a crazy manner. So right here, we can see in October, there's something that does not look right. Scrolling up here, there was some maintenance. Okay, you will know what you had to maintain, what equipment repairs those were, because you're the business owner, you got that done. So make sure that you haven't purchased a new thing that should be an asset and that you actually did have those repairs. But when we scroll up a little bit more here, we can see insurance, $4,800. Now, most likely that insurance is an expense that's going to relate for the entire year. It's okay for you to pop it here if you have a bookkeeper or someone helping you out, because what they will do is they will put the expense into what we call prepaid expenses on your balance sheet, and a 12th of this amount will appear in your income statement every month, because we want to see that the insurance you've paid for a year applies to your business for a year. It's not an expense for October alone. We can see that by the fact that we don't have it every month. So this is something that your accountant might take care of at the end of the year, or that your bookkeeper can assist you with on a monthly basis. It's a little more challenging with, not having the full 12 months to look at, but hopefully you're kind of getting the idea that, things you had some accounting work in August, some accounting work in October. Maybe some of that October work is for September, but nothing else seems to be really jumping out here. We've got some automobile expenses, a little bit higher in October, but once again, we would expect that because the income was higher. You're probably doing a lot more driving around in that month. So I'm going to step away and make these adjustments, and we'll have another look at the profit and loss statement after we've corrected these categories. Now I'm back and I've made those few changes that we looked into earlier. We have our total income and now we have some costs to deliver those services, which makes so much more sense to be able to see what it cost us to earn that income. Now, because this really is so important and so integral to your business, what I've also done is export this out to Excel. So let's take a look at this sheet here. I'll pop this over, and I've summarized each of the categories. I've collapsed them in. As you can see, it's everything that we were just looking at. But what I want to see is the total income, total cost of sales, and then the gross margin. Now, the way we get the gross margin is we divide our gross profit into our total income. And this is a sample company. The numbers are kind of a little bit all over the place, but this is a really, really important thing to manage for your business. What we can see is total to date is 78% margin, which is extraordinarily high, depending on what sort of business you're in. If you're buying and selling goods, you might have a 50% margin. If you're in the restaurant business, who knows? You might be running on a 12% margin. No, that's a bit crazy. But it's an important number that you monitor, because this shows how much money you're actually making from the services you provide after you pay the people who are creating them, you buy the products you sell, whatever it is that it actually costs to deliver. So in these volatile times with costs going crazy, tariffs, import duties, all sorts of uncertainties, if you're not monitoring your gross margin and keeping an idea, keeping an eye on what you're actually making, you can start to lose sight of things really quickly. And then, as I mentioned here, our operating expenses should be relatively flat. Now, they're not. It's we'll look at that a little bit more when I pop back in. But the idea is that you know what it costs you to cover your expenses every month, and therefore you can back into the sales and margin you need just to keep the lights on. So let me pop this away again. and come back to here, which is exactly the same thing we were just looking at, but I created a gross margin from the percentage here. So keep an eye on not just the dollars, but that percentage as well. It's going to show you, well, for one, if there's a mistake in your income statement, but also how to manage your business. Now that we've kind of uncluttered this and tidied it up a little bit, I've moved the interest earned down here. We can have a little bit more detailed look at our operating expenses. These are the types of expenses that you're going to have whether or not you have sales, whether or not you're in operation. You're going to have to pay your rent, you'll have insurance, the utilities are going to be on. So these are important to manage, but they're not as easy to manipulate as perhaps your cost of sales. And if you look here, we have an uncategorized expense. So that's clearly a mistake. I'm going to click in and take a look, and it's bank charges. So why don't we just move that to where it belongs? So we want to be making sure that everything we're looking at makes sense. There's like here we've got pest control services has a -100. I'm not going to delve into that in the sample company, but it could be that perhaps some expenses got put in there and shouldn't have. With your business, you're going to know. So once we get past our gross margin, here our gross profit, we scroll down, we have our operating expenses, then we have our operating income. This is similar to what you've probably heard referred to as EBITDA, which is earnings before interest. We just moved that down. Taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So the depreciation and amortization is the allocation of the cost of buying any assets. And we want to make sure we take that into account as we use the assets. I'm not going into that in a lot of detail, but it's not one of those expenses that we're incurring on a regular basis. And it's very important that you can see what is the net operating income before some of these other items that perhaps have more to do with the financing of the business than they do the operation of the business. If that doesn't completely make sense, feel free to drop me a quick note or let me know if that's something you would like me to explore in more detail. And we get right to the bottom here, our net income. That typically tends to be your taxable income. Not always, there's going to be adjustments, of course, but hopefully looking at this way, your income statement, collapsing it up, we can see we have income. We have our cost of goods sold, which gives rise to our gross profit. Then we have our operating expenses, operating income, and then other just miscellaneous type items that are not necessarily part of our operations. So once you sort through your income statement and you find your mistakes, then you know you can manage your business and your cash flow accurately.
Hope that helps. It's so much easier to understand numbers when you have something to compare them to. Another useful comparison is the prior year. Often you've reviewed your numbers annually. After you've reviewed your numbers monthly, take a look compared to last year, or maybe the same period to date compared to last year. You'll be able to ensure that your gross margin is still on track and that your operating expenses have not changed significantly. This way you can make management decisions before you run out of cash or lose a lot of money. If you're given a report to look at and it's a total with nothing to kind of anchor that information, you can ask to see it in a different format. It doesn't mean that you don't understand what you're looking at. Quite the contrary. It shows you understand what you need. If you look at the numbers regularly, you'll be able to quickly see if something isn't correct. You'll also have a much better understanding of things like your gross margin, your operating costs, and the amount of cash it takes to keep things running. It really is the job of your bookkeeper or accountant to give you useful information. I like to reiterate this because some business owners feel embarrassed at not knowing what they're looking at, when really they haven't been given useful reports. I look forward to hearing how much more useful your reports are now you know what you're looking at. If you don't receive information on a regular basis in a format you can review, ask for it. After the month-end reconciliations are done and the balance sheet reviewed for accuracy, these reports should be provided to you. If you'd like to know if QuickBooks Online is right for you, I have a plan comparison below, and feel free to book a time to chat if you'd like to get it set up. It's what I do. I also have a month-end checklist below you can download, and check out my other videos on the balance sheet. You'll be ready to manage your business finances and make timely decisions. Small business is the backbone of our economy, and you employ many people and are important to your community. If there's any way I can help you be more successful, please do reach out.